Good day, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. We are really excited to be interviewing an amazing newspaper all the way in Makanda. I think it's Grahamstown, and I think it's the oldest newspaper in South Africa, all the way back from 1870, if I'm not mistaken. But I've got with us Rod, who's going to introduce himself and also the newspaper. But this is all talk AI. This is all about trying to figure out this world of AI and how newsrooms can actually integrate AI into their processes and how they can ethically make use of it so that we can get into the crux of things, which is reporting and also journalism. Rod, thanks so much for painting yourself. My name is Christopher Mtsinga. This is an initiative by AIP, who really wants to get into the crux of things and making sure that the independent publishers across the country embrace technology. So, Rod, I like talking. I'm sure that you're going to be doing most of the talking. You can just introduce yourself and also a little bit more about the newspaper and also where you're from, and then we can take it from there.
Okay. Hi, Chris. Thanks so much for the introduction, and it's good to be here with you. Grocott's Mail is the oldest independent newspaper in the country. There are older newspapers that are part of groups, but from 1870. In fact, Macondo, as it was then, Grahamstown in the 19th century, had four daily newspapers competing with each other at one point. So it was actually a hub of press activity at one point. We're down to an online only. We don't print the newspaper anymore. So the transitions have affected us really quite heavily here. But I think the online universe presents really interesting possibilities. We really sad to during COVID, about 10,000 copies of the newspaper were being distributed for free around the community, and people really loved that. And people still hark back to the days of a free newspaper. Our business model, unfortunately, though, doesn't support that currently, and I don't think it ever will ever again. So I think we've got to adapt to the technological sort of ecosystems that have emerged. And we're trying our best to do that. We have brought Grocott from the high street into the African Media Matrix, which is the building that houses the department or the School of Journalism and Media Studies at Rhodes University. So we bought the newspaper Grocott, which was struggling even way back in 2004, with some philanthropic money. And we bought it explicitly so that we could use it as a kind of teaching hospital, to bring our students into a real live local newspaper for training purposes. And I think that worked pretty well, but Grocott's had its own identity and its own autonomy, operating out of High Street, and it had its own imperatives in terms of trying to survive economically. And back in the day, there were up to 50 employees with four separate businesses actually operating in that building. And we're really down to, an online newspaper only these days. So, it's been brutal, to be honest with you, over the last 20 years. But I think we're right sizing in the sense that we have a pretty good team of lecturers who are committed to the project and are bringing their students into it, and from a wide variety of different backgrounds and specializations. We also run the local radio station, Rhodes Music Radio, out of Rhodes University's campus. But there are moves to resuscitate Radio Grahamstown, which is a really important, has been historically a really important voice in this community. And there are plans to get that back up and running by next year. And I think there'll be a good partnership between the two radio stations to make that happen. So that's essentially, who we are, where we're from. I teach writing and editing, so I have to be in the newspaper. I have 30 third-year students who are working on a very interesting project, actually, on education journalism. We're an education city, and we're actually bucking a lot of national trends. So our matric pass rates in 2015 were amongst the worst in the country, and now we're the best performing education centre in the Eastern Cape, and that's due to civic activity, actually, a kind of an alliance of civil society organizations that have come together to make massive interventions in the early childhood space, primary, secondary, and post-matric education. So yeah, we've got some funding even to do some deep journalism this year on the literacy crisis in South Africa, and there's some really promising projects happening in our town. So that keeps our students busy. Our postgraduate diploma students are the core team in the newsroom. There are some fourth year writing students who are doing lifestyle arts journalism. They've just come off Q, which is a special publication for the National Arts Festival. So yeah, we're super busy. And it's always a good thing for journalists to be busy, but sometimes over busy, and that's where digital tools come in to help us
Yeah.
make sense of the chaos out there.
Wow. No, fantastic. Thank you so much for that, layout. So I think let's get straight into it with AI. What kind of transition, when AI was introduced, how did the newsroom actually adapt to it, or were they resistant at first? I know that you've coming from print and you went to digital only now. How did that look like? Did they feel like they were going to lose their jobs? All these questions about technology. Is it going to dumb down the profession, or is it going to enhance it? Can you just go into that a little bit?
Sure. It's difficult to track. It's amazing how fast things happen, and then you're in a whirl, and you're not even sure, what's going on around you. But those are good questions. I think, to be honest, I don't think that local journalists, we employ a couple of really great local journalists to work alongside the lecturers on this. Actually, quite traditionalist and slow to adapt to AI technologies, to be honest, because those tried and tested techniques and practices of local journalism are still what makes things work. So it's about relationships with the local community. It's about your sources. It's about having your finger on the pulse of things. And to be honest, a lot of it is very simple. I mean,
Sure.
I think what's profound in a way is just how the digital ecosystem has evolved in a place like Makanda since COVID, especially through COVID, because that was the only way we could communicate with each other.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, yeah, so I mean, I'd say the big thing that's happened is that people have gone online in a massive way. So our citizens are in interesting places online in the ecology, and it's about tracking that and finding them online. I think that has been the revolution, the true revolution of the last couple of years, rather than AI specifically. So if I could just say something about that quickly. Um, so there's a group in Makanda on Facebook called the Anti-Crime, Grahamstown Anti-Crime,
okay,
and they have 87,000 members. And just wrap your head around that. Makanda, the whole Makanda district, yeah, has 97,000 people. So they're less than 90,000 people living in the city of Makanda, it used to be Grahamstown, and 87,000 people on anti-crime. So that gives you, an indication that something interesting is happening. So you've
yeah,
got 12 administrators there, yeah, who've kind of self-selected, and they moderate this group. A lot of people post anonymously, ostensibly about crime. That was the original motivation, and there were real crime issues in the city, particularly around COVID. Um, but they do all sorts of other things. So there's a lot of civic communication there, and people are critical of the police, but also of local government. People help each other, cooperate with each other. They fundraise for getting kids to initiation ceremonies. When people's houses burn down, there's community comes together. There's a lot of information. There's a lot of solidarity. There's an enormous amount of stuff going on anti-crime. It's just buzzing. So what's been interesting for us as journalists is to go and join them there, to go and listen, to monitor, to find out what people are really saying, thinking, feeling, and taking our cue from that for some of our journalism. What's happened in town is almost the opposite. So you've got in the city itself, there are two DA wards in traditionally, or not traditionally, but historically, sort of more white areas, the suburbs of Grahamstown, Mukunda. There are 35 WhatsApp groups. So I sit on a little street and I've got a WhatsApp group for my street. Then I've got a WhatsApp group for my hyperlocal area. And then I've got a WhatsApp group for my ward. And then I can join all the other ones as well if I really want to know what's going on over there. And high-tech security started that actually, again, crime impetus to start those groups. But they're now, in my ward, I think there's 600 people on a WhatsApp group, all talking to each other, sharing information. It's supposed to be non-party political, but obviously there's quite a lot of politics happening there, a lot of civic life is happening there. The problem is that those groups are really confined to the city. So the anti-crime Facebook group kind of plays that role in the township areas. And most of the posts are in Isikosa, but you've got this kind of bifurcated public sphere between the city and the townships, which is a problem. So I think as journalists, we're trying to bridge between the divide between the public spheres. So we will listen to people on the WhatsApp groups, we'll listen to people in the Facebook groups, but we'll cross-post information and try and bridge between the different, divides in the city. So that's actually manual work in a way. I mean, you can automate, community engagement monitoring tools are coming out for AI, Hootsuite, etc. There are ways of monitoring things.
Okay.
And we need
So
to get into that.
you're mentioning Hootsuite. Obviously, that's a social media kind of scheduling process, but it's also maybe data, analytics, etc. So, what other tools are you using actually to streamline or let's dumb it down, declutter all this information that's happening? How are you guys using it at your newspaper?
Well, I'll be honest with you. We're doing it the old way because we have a lot of students working for us. We assign students to individual channels. So it's actually physical monitoring. So there are some master students who are beginning to get into these AI tools. So if you ask
Okay.
me this question next year at the same time, I'd be able to say, Convaletu has found out that Hootsuite can do this. These are the affordances that could accrue from community engagement monitoring AI tools. But to be honest with you, we're not there yet. So I think we're behind the curve on that. And that's a great pity because there's an enormous amount of value there for journalists in doing that kind of monitoring. I think where we kind of done better is where we kind of take complex documents, like maybe an IDP document or court proceedings, around there's a big project at the moment to put 25 huge wind turbines onto the commonage area, and the money is going to come to the municipality because they manage the commonage, and we're kind of saying, okay, what are you going to do with the 40 million guys? How will you be using that? But there's a whole lot of stuff in the court documents about the environmental impacts and the environmental procedures that weren't followed properly. So you take a 100-page court document and you push that through a powerful AI engine. It summarizes things for you very, very quickly. What it will also do is, if you prompt it extremely well and you tell it why you need this information, it will come up with brilliant questions to ask the various stakeholders, whether it be the Makana municipality or EDF Renewables, who are the people who want to put these things up. And also the people who are objecting, the conservation groups and the big, there are a whole lot of very interesting initiatives around a corridor, environmental corridor, which involve a whole lot of game farms coming together and objecting to this thing. But it's also important, because we're usually on the side of, conservation and so on, but we're also on the side of economic development. In the Eastern Cape, we don't have a lot of stuff. We need wind in a way. We need industrial growth. So we need to weigh up, how many jobs would be created by wind farms versus the kind of jobs that we'd potentially lose because of tourism impacts. How many jobs are provided by these farms, these game farms? And are they, yeah, are they good jobs? What potential going forward is there? How do you weigh up conservation goals with economic development needs? It's very complex stuff, and
Yeah.
AI has an incredible ability to sift through complex data and present those kinds of. I mean, not to necessarily find the answer, but to create a strong sense of these are the issues at stake, and citizens need to consider these different things. We need to have a deliberation and debate about these things in the public sphere, but we need to simplify it. We need to, break it down and present it to ordinary lay people. And I think, it would have taken us weeks to try and sift through all this stuff. And literally, the stuff comes out, it spits it out in a few minutes. Some very, very beautiful summaries and excellent questions for all the stakeholders to the point where they kind of start going, geesh, you have to give us a week. These are complicated questions to answer, and we'll come back to you in a week with, and they try and answer all those things. But I think they're a bit shocked that there's this level of detail and this level of research that has been done, obviously AI aided, but it puts everyone on their toes, and suddenly people realize, my goodness, yeah, we're going to have to take this seriously. We can't just fob it off with a bit of PR. We have to apply our minds to these questions.
So, okay, we're speaking AI. I'm going to put you to task right now. Top five AI tools that you're using in your newsroom. You've spoken about, um, you know, drilling down into complex documents that will take weeks on end for people to actually get their minds around it and also formulate questions and do the write-up. So, the top five tools are you using? Maybe three, but top five.
Okay. Well, look, again, I have to say that in a year's time, I hope I would give you a better list. It's actually pretty simple. And I'll give you a very, very simple one to start with. So the university pays Grammarly about, I don't know, R1 million a year so that every student on campus can use Grammarly Premium, which is a very powerful sub-editing, editing tool. Um, and I have to say that the use of Grammarly, I force my students to use it because I don't want to clean up all their copy. It's a simple thing they can do on their own.
Yeah,
Um, and a lot of them don't, and I have to badger them until they do. But once they get it, they realize that they have this person tapping them on the shoulder the whole time, giving them suggestions for not only corrections, but also better expression, clarity in expression, and so on. So Grammarly Premium is fantastic if you can afford it. Again, it always comes down to cost. So stuff that the university provides. I just talked to a geographer yesterday who she's an urban geographer and she does story mapping of important public issues in Makanda. And she said that the university buys that stuff. So I'm kind of going, well, why the heck aren't we doing story maps? So she, for example, takes a controversial public issue like street art. Some people are against street art because it's everywhere in Makanda now. She's mapped all the street art. She's got the geolocations of all of them. You click on the geolocation, you get the street art, you get an explanation of who the artists were. So you can take a tour and there's a whole lot of background information on it as well. So it's just this beautiful thing. There's a controversy around the botanical gardens and how we should use them in our town. She's done a whole website on that and a bunch of other things as well. She wants to do one on Fingo Village and heritage issues in Fingo Village and heritage preservation, that kind of. It sounds a bit arcane, but for people living in Fingo Village, I think they'd be really interested in that stuff. Um, so there's a geographer doing the job of journalists, and I'm kind of saying, well, I want to get hold of the Story Map software, which is not AI specifically, but it's very powerful digital tools that can help map a community and add value to public debates around the use of public parks and facilities and heritage issues and art and all sorts of things. So I'm really excited about that. So story map is another one. And then really it's about, I'm sitting here with my other screen, which is Claude AI, which is owned by Anthropic, which seems to be one of the more ethical AI companies. Um, so I like Claude very much. Claude is great at language, very responsive to good prompting, cuts through the clutter. It's the latest version 4.0, which is not accessible to all the journalists, by the way. The basic version is, but not the 4.0, which I pay for. So I personally
Right.
pay $20 a month for this thing because it's revolutionized the way that I teach, assess, plan, research. Um,
Cool.
the thing that worries me about some of the AIs like Claude is that it's very good at writing for you. So it will produce a pretty decent article. And I have this very difficult relationship around AI with my students and student journalists because they won't necessarily use AI to do research and to think of strong questions and to analyze documents, but will use it to write their story very quickly, which is problematic because you'll lose nuance and you'll lose voice, you'll lose authenticity. And you'll lose practice and you'll probably start alienating your audiences because there's a sort of flattening in tone that happens through AI, although it's getting better and better all the time, I have to say. It is a worry that there are these kind of shortcuts in the actual crafting of the journalism that I'm concerned about. But having said that, I'm training my students in how to prompt well and to have a conversation with AI and to not leave a response, to probe and to question and to point out mistakes and to, talk about differences in emphasis and yeah, really, really go deep, as deep as possible. So
Cool.
something like Claude has an Opus version, which, is brilliant for as I said before, if you one of the things I did was I took an IDP from Ndlambe municipality, which is relatively well run, and I took the Makana IDP, and I got AI to compare them. I did a comparative analysis, and it was mind-blowing. I mean, it just pointed out just how much better the Ndlambe one was, probably because it had been AI assisted, to be fair.
Yeah, yeah.
But also it was clear how it was better. And that forms the basis of a really useful engagement with the Makana municipality around the cut and paste job they do on these things every year, rather than using it as a genuine instrument of local governance. Um, yeah, and of course, there are less ethical AIs. Last week, Grok 4 came out. So I have a problem. I have a problem using Grok because of its origin, its connection to X and Elon Musk, and the politics of Grok is horrendous. I mean, apparently they downloaded 85 terabytes of stuff from LibGen, an illegal online library, and they got their employees to download all this illegal stuff to train it. Not to mention all the other evil things that X is up to. But I have to say, I did use it for a very specific query around the literacy wars in South Africa and to what extent we are mistaken in the way that we teach literacy in South Africa. As you know, we have a huge crisis. 19% of grade fours can read for meaning in South Africa. But in America, they have a similar thing where only 35% of kids in the richest country on earth can read for meaning in grade four as well. And there's specific reasons why that happened. And I used Grok to get into some of the deep research on that. And it was just mind-blowing how
Wow.
good it was. Yeah.
Yeah, so
So, Elon's claims are true.
no, super. I think you've mentioned pretty much two that I'm very familiar with. That is obviously Grammarly and Claude. A lot of journalists and newsrooms out there using ChatGPT. Some are using Notebook LM, etc. So Gemini, etc. So you mentioned cost being an issue here as well, with all these large language, any technology in essence, right? So I want to find out from you a little bit more about how do you think independent publishers really working at grassroots level, how they can embrace AI, how they can get into it. Some of them are running two-man shows. Their newsrooms are very small. How can they just get started?
Mm.
Maybe some suggestions. And also, I like the fact that you're kind of in not two minds really, but you want your journalist students and also your journalists there as well to have an ethical approach to using AI. Like for example, a calculator was invented. Then people thought, hey, people are not going to start thinking about maths, right? But at the end of the day, you need to have an understanding of it. So, just as a closing part, how would you like, get journalists, the newsrooms around South Africa to embrace AI, and how can they get started, and how can they get like an ethical, let's call it guardrails in place, just in a
Yeah.
nutshell?
Okay. That's a very good question. Look, there are a couple of tools and AI models that will give you quite a lot for free. Um, So, for example, Gemini, I think, will give you some pretty powerful tools for, so that's a Google-based thing. I think, again, it would be interesting, given the relationship between AIP and Google, to think about ways in which, membership could then create affordances and maybe discounts or even, free services using those sort of Google suites. So I think that's a way to go. I mean, Google is right there on the top right hand, the button is there, and Gemini is very good. And of course, I'm not suggesting one is better than the other, and they all have different strengths and weaknesses. But I think that idea of buying a license, for Grammarly for everyone in the membership pool would be fantastic.
Yeah,
Something like Grammarly, something like, the Google Suite stuff, would be a good starting point. But I think it's also about, I've done this with my students. So I've sat with them and prompted, and sort of asked, what would you ask now? And it's an incredible way to develop a story idea, to think about different angles and different vantage points on a story. Look at what you get and what of that is potentially usable and what isn't. So it's really a conversation. And it has to be done, I think, rather than just an individual journalist, has their thing and then they do, some stuff on the side. It actually needs to be transparent in a newsroom that we're using AI in this way, and this is why we're doing it. This is what we want to achieve with it. We don't want to substitute for the process of actually, crafting a piece of writing that needs to have authenticity, and it needs to be, you know, you writing, because you've lent, you can take your writing and say, tell me what you think of my writing, and get
sure.
feedback on it. But to actually substitute your own process of writing, you really are just outsourcing your brain work and eventually, there's a brain rot is going to set in. It's not a
Yeah,
good thing.
cannibalism.
It's really not a good thing. So it is about transparency in the newsroom. It's about having a policy, a kind of an approach, and a collaborative approach to this, and finding ways of affording it, maybe through the alliance, through the network, of finding some baseline plans that can really help everyone just put their toes into it and give it a try and start using it. Because honestly, to not use it is crazy, and especially in overstretched small newsrooms.
Yeah,
I mean, we haven't even talked about transcription services, which would be, I mean, Otter is really expensive, but it's also really good. Some of the AI is attached to, something like Zoom or Google
like
Teams
voice to
and
text, right?
yes, exactly. And so you've got transcription, but you also got summary, really pretty good. But
Yes.
again, you've got to be careful because you could lose nuance, and you can't give over your brain to this thing. You're using it as
Mhm.
a tool, and sometimes it's incredibly valuable in the moment, but you can't just you get so busy, you suddenly start realizing, oh my goodness, I'm actually overusing this thing now.
Sure.
I need to think, I need to take time out to really get back on top of the story and not to be outsourcing it completely. So we really on the guard. I mean, we were, in baby steps here. I think
Yeah.
everybody. And we need to pay attention to the steps we're taking.
Thank you so much, Rod.